In this real-side experience, I would be in the company of a number of individuals on their respective processes of awareness as impressions would reveal, and although I wasn't afforded a visual of them specifically, they were the Earth-based NuFriends. We would be present in a vast college-style campus, very possibly one of the real-side universal universities, where real education, sharing and support for all those on their ears recognizing journeys is a constant, and with the real guides in attendance, so ensuring no beings of ill-intended persuasions are afforded access, etc. But I couldn't confirm this was one of such real reference-providing guide creations, however. The initial part of the campus we entered comprised predominantly of children, the overall campus segregated according to age group. All body forms present were human, and even if this wasn't a universal university, it certainly was not a creation of the dark forces as impressions revealed. If the NuFriends and myself had an objective here wasn't made apparent, but I became separated from the rest of the group, finding myself on my own, and would inadvertently enter another area of the overall campus, one where all humans were adults, but also present would be a series of market-style stands, where much by way of various arts and crafts were being displayed. I would somewhat clumsily stumble into a display, and although rescuing most of the items, one slipped through my grasp to smash upon the ground. Emerging onto the scene would be the irate owner of the display stand I had knocked over. She was a young, in her 20s, black human female, and although offering to pay for the item I had damaged, she instead waved her hands dismissively, for indeed there would as though be an instant recollection between us. This wasn't a past life recognition, as can often be the case, where although we have no current memory of an individual, through a past lifetime association is the idea of them subconsciously placed, and as we encounter them for the first time in our current lifetimes, so we have a sense of familiarity, which would stem from the subconscious past lifetime affiliation we had with them, etc. This was more so that she and I were supposed to make a contact, and indeed impressions revealed she was the black female who had been presented as part of the group of 6, where in a previous real-side experience I shared, when this group, of which Jeremy and I were a part of, formulates and are in a closer proximity, so they produce a combined frequency which was essential with our dealings with a certain stepping up alien body types, and specifically to the bases they operate within. So in actuality, the personal self oblivious as to its purpose at this campus, and indeed becoming separated from the other NuFriends, all was being orchestrated by the real awareness, for the purposes by which this engaging with this essential member of the group of 6 be so, that although I had encountered her before on the real side, and determined the part she was to play, for which at that moment she was accepting of, for the particular assignments the group of 6 were to be involved with, it was as though as moments had passed from my initial experience with her, she had somewhat lost her focus and intent with the life and awareness beneficial activities the group of 6 were to be undertaking, as though she had slipped back into her personal self-consciousness more so, and needed a little nudge and reminder of the possibility of her involvement if she so chose. Although she seemed to now be oblivious of her role in the group of 6, and although she recognized me and we got along as though we had known each other for lifetimes, and perhaps this was also a possibility in fact, I had to somewhat tease her out of her own mind illusions, as though my presence was gradually removing the obscuring fog from her vision and the beneficial purpose she had the opportunity to serve as. And so I would remain with her for a time, as though my being in her immediate company was drawing her from her limited personal self-position. At one point, however, she seemed to randomly desire to clamber up a structure that was present in the scene we now were walking through. She would lose her footing, tumbling to the ground, fragments of the structure raining about her, with one sharp piece actually penetrating through her very head and right eyeball. Curiously, this seemed of no concern to her. She appeared to be in no pain, and an individual stepping forward, who as impressions suggested was a real guide, would remove the fragment from her head, her face reformulating as though nothing had happened. Very possibly the guide was simply removing the idea that affected as her injury, taking it on and dispelling it himself, for everything we experience, including that which ails or debilitates the body forms, are ideas we have agreed with. Remove the ideas, and the effects will no longer be present. The guide would then be taking on the effect karma of this clumsy mishap. Completely recovered, she would enquire of me what kind of art or music I liked. I would present her with my preferences. She herself would reveal her preferred music that was of such a kind that I never had heard of, that impressions revealed didn't exist, at least currently on the earth. Initially, I had considered her human, but suggesting now perhaps there was more to her than met the eye, and maybe she also boasted extraordinary resilience and recuperative ability, as opposed to the guide being responsible for rectifying her mishap. Regardless, the scene would come to a close. I had re-established a contact with the black female, part of the 6, though one that had somewhat drifted from her role within it, suggesting that since my last shared experience regarding the group of 6, there had been no further developments in regards to our alien engaging assignments, but that now we were to proceed and take further steps, and necessary then was it to re-establish a contact with the rest of the group, as all 6 were essential where certain particular operations were concerned. Although, as I also previously revealed, there were other alternative group members should the primary 6 candidates be unable to be assembled or unwilling, etc. In the following scene, I would find myself in another vast community-style setup, many various body types present, and the impressions would reveal that this served again as a position in creation that was a kind of sanctuary for those taking up residence in what was an overall natural environment layout with the dwellings made available for all, were all potentially on the verge of stepping up, of establishing intent to recognize the ears, etc., and as though overseeing the protection of all the soon-to-be stepping up body forms would be a relatively aware being and his entrusted second. For it is so that the process of awareness involves a facing and releasing of all idea agreements and attachments of the consciousness. Until then, individuals are the effects of the entirety of their consciousness construct, including all the agreements as extended to others that allow the potentiality of they being the recipient of harm and even eliminated at the hands of others, where such agreement permissions have been consciousness installed. Each individual designs their own movie experience and the roles others can assume within them. Absent of the ideas, the roles provided, then no other being can become the effects that are our tormentors, dominators, or slayers. And so, we each will become progressively more indomitable in creation, as we continue to release all ideas that facilitate the ability of others to harm us, and then we move into a position where we consciously choose our experiences and those in relation to others. And so initially, those beginning their awareness processes will be very vulnerable, as it was with all the body forms present in this environmental commune, for they were on the verge of stepping up en masse, and so had the entirety of the consciousness still fully agreed with at that moment. In such situations then, the guides, or other new friends, or aware beings, may be assigned the task as protectors, as it was with the more aware being and his second, who were overseers of the overall commune. Of course, as the deciders, we not only afford the roles that attackers can assume, but also those of our rescuers and liberators, and so we can only effectively assist others within the parameters that their agreements allow. We are subject and limited to the movie they are producing. We must adhere to the scripts they create, so to speak. It seemed I also was an accepted resident in the commune, and all those in residency had a particular fruit or vegetable they were cultivating. Symbolically, these were then ideas we were developing, and our progress in regards to them was overseen by the same aware being and his second that were responsible for the safety of all the body types present. My particular idea took the form of a red bell pepper, and as I presented it to the aware being, and on him tasting it, he would proclaim it required refining, a refining of the idea that it represented, in other words. Although no indication was given as to what these ideas actually were, but that all were in the forms of healthy fruits and vegetables, so as the representation goes, these would be more so beneficial ideas. As I said, protection in regards to any individual is according to the agreements they harbour. Even a guide cannot interfere if the free will agreement choice of an individual is to experience harm or destruction at the hands of another. For suddenly the commune was beset upon by hordes of monstrous body forms. These were expressions of the dark forces who will be motivated to attack, intimidate, and destroy any body type that shows any indication of setting intent with the ears. For the releasing of consciousness agreement that such entails, also is a releasing of the agreements to the dark forces which maintain their control of the simulators, and so then they are compelled to discourage any who undergo such a process, as this would be undermining of their agreement-dependent controlling positions. A number of the body forms now laying siege to the commune were werewolves, the bipedal, two-legged versions, as such a distortion of a body type is generally a reflected effect of a consciousness equally as distorted. Many of the werewolf body types do operate in dark force affiliated capacities, and here they were part of the monster assault crew. As I said, they were subject to agreement parameters as set by those they desired to assail, as to if they actually could harm or eliminate them, and it seems I was unable to assist any of the soon-to-be stepping up body forms for the same reason. They hadn't extended the agreements to me that I could. The overseer was aware to a degree, as I said, but he too had certain agreements where, although most of the marauding monsters couldn't harm him, one in particular could, a huge slug-like creature with multiple horns sprouting from its bloated body. But also he had extended agreements to me that I could assist him, and this I would do, as I protected him from the gargantuan slug monster as it attempted to swallow him whole. The mayhem would eventually subside. The monsters had done whatever damage agreement allowed that they could. As I said, as the deciders of our experience, we are only as vulnerable as the agreements we hold to that dictate that we are. And as we face and release the consciousness construct, so we become less susceptible to the ill-intended body types in all their expressions. It will be rather the arduous journey, as we must expect that the dark forces will throw everything at us to derail our processes to eventual recognition, but with intent maintained with the true reality, as all intents are already complete in actuality. Then we simply go through whatever experiences that roll out accordingly, with the realization that we will get through it, providing we maintain the real intent of his recognition. In the next scene, I would be at a location I had visited on a previous real side experience many years ago. It was an open countryside setting, but present also were a number of structures that impressions revealed had been Tartarian in their design. Additionally, had there been a series of geometrical patterns on the ground, and where an individual was as though taking groups of beings through an intricate series of required motions in relation to the geometry, which would facilitate their ability to access another and long-forgotten dimensional area of creation, as though this particular creational spot and method was the only means by which this other dimensional area could be accessed. For whatever reason, the various beings present and under the direction of this gifted individual would desire to be transported to. For if executed correctly, a portal would manifest, and the other dimensional position made available. That just like anything in creation, this portal and mechanism for access to this long-forgotten dimensional area were simply created ideas, which as they become a consciousness installed, so the nature of whatever the ideas are affected. As I said, no indication was ever provided as to the nature of this other dimensional area, but seemingly certain beings had the inclination to travel there under the guidance of this individual who harbored the secret by which the site and the geometry could be utilized for such. That although, through the real awareness, which is part of the isness everything that permeates through all consciousness, that every idea of it is available to it, so the simulated body forms can be inserted into any creational spot or dimension, regardless of how forgotten in the mists of time it may be, or how inaccessible it is according to consciousness design. Nevertheless, oftentimes on the real side, we may make use of what has been decided and created through the consciousness. And this would be the case here, as now I would return to this very site, where the Tartarian structures were present and the geometrical markings etched onto the ground. I would be in the company of Val, and it appeared we intended to use the very methods as utilized by the individual with the groups of beings he was tutoring as to the accessing of this other dimensional spot, that although no impressions were afforded as to what business we had there, this was however our destination. The experience ending there, as Val and I proceeded to activate the portal through the same series of emotions, hand gestures, etc., in conjunction with the traversing across the ground geometry in a certain way, and perhaps more will be revealed as to the purpose for us accessing what was, as I said, a long-forgotten dimensional area only accessible via the site we were in.